I have kind of an unusual project. I'm looking to install a sort of drive-through car washing system in my driveway. There was a pause, filled only by what sounded like someone chewing gravel. Car wash, huh? In the driveway? Al grunted. Like, with the big rolly brushes and stuff? Well, maybe not that fancy, I backpedaled. More like sprinklers? Some brushes? A way to drive through and get the car rinsed off easily. Huh, Al said. Driveway car wash, right. Need plumbing, maybe some kind of frame? Drainage? Yes, probably. I honestly hadn't thought that far ahead. Right, Al mumbled. Yeah, sure, piece of cake. Done weirder. Built a potato cannon turret for some guy's deer stand last fall. Driveway car wash? No problem. I'll swing by tomorrow. It was 7:15 a.m. on a Tuesday, a time when civilized people are either still dreaming or quietly contemplating the existential dread of their commute over a second cup of coffee. I, however, was performing the frantic, one-legged ballet known as trying to put on loafers while holding a lukewarm travel mug and an overstuffed briefcase. I was late. Again. The coffee wasn't kicking in. The briefcase felt like it contained lead bricks, mostly unopened junk mail and reports I meant to read. And my only thought was escaping the gravitational pull of my house and getting to the office before my boss noticed my absence. I finally jammed my foot into the second loafer, sloshed coffee precariously close to my tie, grabbed my keys, and yanked open the front door, poised for a desperate sprint to my trusty chariot parked in the driveway. My escape route, however, was blocked. Standing sentinel at the edge of my lawn, positioned with the strategic immobility of a chess piece defending its king, was Mrs. Peterson. Her arms were folded like a disapproving praying mantis. Her lips were pursed into a thin, judgmental line that could slice bread, and her eyes, her eyes, were fixed with the laser-like intensity of a heat-seeking missile locked onto my poor, unsuspecting Ford Fusion. Martin! The name shot out of her mouth like a poisoned dart, sharp enough to etch glass, or at least curdle the milk in my coffee. Honestly, just look at that vehicle. Reluctantly, I followed her gaze. Okay, fine. Maybe my car wasn't exactly ready for a concours d'elegance. Maybe Grubby was putting it mildly. My Fusion, a perfectly reliable workhorse that had faithfully ferried me through 5 years of commutes, grocery runs, and the occasional ill-advised shortcut, was currently exhibiting what you might call an earthy patina. It sported a rather fetching abstract design composed primarily of dried mud splatter, a souvenir from a weekend attempt at exploring a scenic back road that turned out to be mostly swamp. A constellation of bird droppings, the local pigeons apparently used my car for target practice, and a general film of road grime that gave it a certain je ne sais quoi, or perhaps just quoi. It looked, in short, like a car that actually ventured beyond the pristine confines of Pleasant Valley Estates and interacted with the messy reality of the outside world. "Morning, Mrs. P," I mumbled, trying to execute a flanking maneuver towards the driver's side door. My briefcase bumped against my leg. "Yeah, hit some unexpected mud puddles exploring that new trail on Saturday. Fun times! Planning to wash it this weekend, definitely on the list." I tried a hopeful smile. It didn't take. "This weekend?" she echoed, her voice rising in pitch, threatening to shatter nearby windows or summon bats. "Martin, it's Tuesday. That filth," she spat the word like it was toxic, "has been sitting there, accumulating additional layers of disgrace in plain sight of God and everyone for 3 whole days. It's an eyesore, a blight. It's dragging down the entire aesthetic of the block. What must people think when they drive by? They must think we live in squalor." I sighed internally, a deep, weary sound that resonated in my very soul. Welcome to Pleasant Valley Estates, a suburban utopia where the lawns were greener than artificial turf, thanks to bi-weekly chemical dousings. The houses were painted in shades of beige so subtle they were distinguishable only by forensic paint chip analysis. And the primary existential threat wasn't crime or economic downturn, but the horrifying possibility of a visible layer of dust on a neighbor's vehicle triggering a catastrophic plunge in collective property values. Mrs. Peterson, resident #1, founder, chair, and sole member of the self-appointed Curb Appeal Committee, saw herself as the last bastion against such creeping automotive decay. "Look, I understand appearances are important," I said, jingling my keys with increasing impatience, my escape window rapidly closing. "I'll try to rinse it off tonight after work, promise. Really gotta run now, meeting at 8. "Rinse it off?" She sniffed, a sound of pure disdain. "Martin, that vehicle requires a deep, penitent scrubbing. It needs exfoliation. It reflects poorly on all of us. It suggests neglect. A certain laissez-faire attitude that is simply unacceptable in a community of this caliber." She gave me, and the car, a pointed look that implied my Fusion's dirt level was directly correlated with my moral failings, and possibly my credit score. This wasn't a new offensive in the war of the unwashed car. Oh no. This was merely the latest skirmish in a long and tedious campaign. My car, parked squarely, legally, and entirely reasonably in my own damn driveway, seemed to be Mrs. Peterson's personal white whale. If it displayed evidence of having encountered weather within the past 48 hours, I'd get the look. A complex expression involving narrowed eyes, pursed lips, and a slight, disapproving tilt of the head. If a bird, in a moment of natural, albeit inconvenient biological function, dared to use my hood as a latrine, I could expect a passive-aggressive comment about maintaining vigilance against avian nuisances the next time I dared retrieve my mail while she was within earshot. The notes started a few months back. Little slips of paper tucked under the wiper blade like parking tickets issued by the taste police. Friendly reminder: vehicle cleanliness contributes significantly to neighborhood charm and perceived value. Then, taped ominously to my front door, FYI, several concerned neighbors have expressed dismay regarding the persistent state of uncleanliness of the blue sedan parked at this residence. I was fairly certain the several concerned neighbors consisted entirely of Mrs. Peterson, her equally judgmental poodle Fifi, who always seemed to yap louder when my car was particularly dusty, and possibly a squirrel she'd coerced into signing an affidavit. I tried. God knows I tried, mostly to get her off my back. I sacrificed precious hours of my already limited weekend R&R to appease the aesthetic sensibilities of Pleasant Valley Estates. I bought special soaps, microfiber towels, even one of those fancy power washers that promised a touchless clean. It lied. I washed the car with a frequency that bordered on obsessive for a man whose previous car washing schedule involved driving through the occasional heavy rainstorm. But life, as they say, finds a way. Or in my case, dirt finds a way. It rains unexpectedly, leaving water spots. The lawn crew down the street sends up clouds of dust and grass clippings that seem magnetically attracted to my freshly washed paint. Birds, possessing an uncanny understanding of my washing schedule, continue to view my car roof as their personal commode. And frankly, sometimes, after a brutal week at work, the thought of spending Saturday morning meticulously scrubbing fossilized insect remains off my grill holds significantly less appeal than, say, staring blankly at the television or attempting a nap. Then came the official letter. Cream-colored envelope, embossed HOA logo, the whole 9 yards. It cited, in excruciating detail, Bylaw 14G, subsection 3, Paragraph A. Vehicles parked in public view, including but not limited to driveways, carports, and designated street parking, must be maintained in a clean and presentable condition, free from excessive accumulation of dirt, grime, mud, or other visible debris that detracts from the harmonious visual aesthetic of the community. It included dated, time-stamped photographic evidence, clearly taken by Mrs. P from her sniper's nest window, of my car in various states of alleged unpresentability. It concluded by demanding immediate and sustained compliance to avoid monetary penalties as outlined in the HOA fine schedule, Appendix F. Sustained compliance, I raged to Chloe later that evening, waving the letter like a battle standard. What in the hell does that even mean? Do they expect me to follow the car around with a Swiffer? Wrap it in saran wrap every time I park it? It's a car. It exists in the world. It gets dirty. And it's my car, parked in my driveway. Chloe, ever the voice of reason, poured herself a generous glass of Chardonnay and sighed the sigh of a woman long accustomed to her husband's suburban skirmishes. Marty, honey, I know it's ridiculous. I know she's ridiculous. But honestly, is this the hill you want to die on? Can't you just, I don't know, take it through the automatic wash down the street once a week on your way home from work? It's $5. Less than the fine, probably. It's the principle, Chloe, I insisted, pacing the kitchen linoleum. It's not about the $5. It's about her and the HOA dictating the acceptable level of dust on my personal property. On my property. What's next? Fines if my welcome mat isn't sufficiently welcoming? Citations for unharmonious wind chimes? My voice was rising. Where does it end? Despite my principled stand, the threat of actual fines did motivate me. For a glorious, sun-drenched 2 weeks, I became a model of automotive hygiene. I washed the Fusion twice. I wiped it down with detailer spray. I even cleaned the wheels. My car gleamed with an unnatural, almost alarming cleanliness. Mrs. Peterson actually gave me a curt, tight-lipped nod one morning as I backed out of the driveway, an expression I interpreted as the Pleasant Valley equivalent of a ticker tape parade. My victory was short-lived. First came the freak spring hailstorm that left tiny dimples all over the hood, invisible to the naked eye, but I felt sure Mrs. Peterson would detect them with sonar. Then, on my commute home, I got stuck behind a massive truck hauling gravel, which proceeded to shed its load like a metallic dog shaking off water. My car, particularly the front end and windshield, looked like it had been used for target practice by microscopic meteorites. Add a light evening shower to turn the accumulated dust into muddy streaks, and by the next morning, my car was once again deemed aesthetically offensive. Before I could even formulate a plan involving buckets and sponges, another cream-colored envelope appeared, delivered with the swiftness of a ninja assassin. This time it contained not a warning, but a bill. $50. Failure to rectify previous violation. Bylaw 14G, it declared sternly. Vehicle observed in unpresentable condition. Excessive grime, mud spatter, gravel dust, on date and time. She must have been waiting, camera poised, for the first muddy raindrop to fall. That night, commiserating over beers and pizza with my buddy Doug, I finally reached my breaking point. The injustice, the sheer obsessive nitpickery. $50, I fumed, slamming my beer bottle down on the coffee table, narrowly missing a stack of Chloe's magazines. $50 for driving through hail and getting stuck behind a gravel truck. She must have a direct feed from a weather satellite and a spy drone hovering over my driveway. This is harassment. Doug, who derived immense vicarious pleasure from my ongoing war with the forces of suburban conformity, choked on his pepperoni. Dude, that's insane! She's totally obsessed with your car's honor. What are you gonna do now, start parking it in the living room? I don't know, I groaned, slumping back against the couch cushions in defeat. Move to a commune? Pave the entire driveway and paint it camouflage so she can't see the car? Hire a sniper to take out the neighborhood pigeons so at least the bird poop stops? Whoa, dark man, Doug chuckled, wiping pizza grease off his chin. Nah, you can't let her win like that. You gotta think bigger. You gotta lean into it. You know what she really wants? Perfection. For that car to be clean all the time. Like magically, effortlessly clean. He took a long swig of beer, a mischievous glint appearing in his eyes. You should just install your own car wash right there in the driveway. Make it super convenient. Wash it every morning on your way out. Problem solved. He was joking. I knew he was joking. His grin gave it away. The sheer, glorious absurdity of the idea was meant as a punchline. But the words hung there, shimmering in the air like heat haze off asphalt. Install your own car wash. Super convenient. Problem solved. Chloe, who had been half listening from the kitchen while trying to decipher our takeout order, groaned loudly enough to be heard over the TV. Doug, don't you dare encourage him. Marty, he is kidding. Do not get any ideas. Too late. The seed, the beautiful, terrible, gloriously absurd, spite-fueled seed, had not only been planted, it had instantly sprouted, sending tendrils of possibility snaking through my outraged brain. A car wash, in my driveway. The ultimate weapon in the war against unreasonable cleanliness standards. The peak of malicious compliance. They want the car clean? Fine. I'll make it so ridiculously easy to clean, it'll always be clean. It wasn't just genius. It wasn't just madness. It was inevitable. Doug, I said slowly, turning to him, a dangerous grin spreading across my face, ignoring Chloe's frantic head-shaking in the background. That is, without a doubt, the single best idea you have ever had in your entire life. No! Chloe cried, rushing into the living room, brandishing a spatula like a weapon. Marty, absolutely not. Think! Think of the water bill. Think of the soap runoff. Think of the sheer, unadulterated tackiness. The neighbors will revolt. Mrs. Peterson will have a full-blown grade-A aneurysm right there on her prize-winning petunias. Exactly, I crowed, leaping off the couch, already picturing the schematics in my head. Ultimate convenience, unquestionable compliance. And maybe, just maybe, I lowered my voice to a conspiratorial whisper. A little bit of sweet, sudsy property value lowering revenge. Ignoring Chloe's increasingly desperate pleas for sanity, Marty, think of the permits, the zoning, the resale value. I grabbed my laptop. My search history, previously a mundane landscape of work-related queries and how to remove stubborn bird poop, quickly devolved into a bizarre rabbit hole of industrial cleaning equipment and questionable DIY plumbing. DIY automatic car wash system. High-pressure agricultural sprinklers cheap. Used bus washing brushes for sale. PVC pipe configurations maximum water pressure. Can a leaf blower function as a car dryer? The possibilities were endless, terrifying, and almost certainly violated numerous city ordinances I hadn't bothered, and had no intention of bothering, to check. Operation Autospa was officially underway. My initial, overly optimistic vision involved a Heath Robinson-esque contraption cobbled together from parts readily available at the local hardware store. I pictured a complex network of garden hoses feeding oscillating lawn sprinklers strategically zip-tied to repurposed tiki torches. Maybe some car washing mitts duct-taped to rotating fan blades for the scrubbing action. And, of course, my trusty leaf blower, suspended precariously from an overhead beam, for the spot-free rinse. Chloe, upon viewing my preliminary sketches, which looked suspiciously like a diagram for a Wile E. Coyote trap, calmly pointed out several potentially fatal flaws. Marty, she'd said, rubbing her temples. Best case scenario, this floods the entire street and shorts out the neighborhood's power grid. Worst case scenario, you electrocute yourself while simultaneously impaling yourself on a tiki torch. Okay, maybe she had a point. Maybe my engineering prowess wasn't quite up to the task of creating a safe and functional automated vehicle cleansing system. Maybe I needed professional help. Or at least help from someone who owned more tools than a hammer and a roll of duct tape. Finding said help proved challenging. Licensed plumbers hung up when I mentioned driveway car wash. Reputable contractors politely explained zoning laws and permit requirements before quoting astronomical sums clearly designed to make me go away. I was beginning to despair. My dream of sudsy revenge fading when I saw the ad stuck to a telephone pole near the industrial park, right next to flyers for lost cats and questionable psychic readings. Big Al's Fix It and Forget It. Plummin', framin', roofin', weldin', odd jobs, weird stuff. No job too big, too small, or too weird. Reasonable rates, mostly sober. Below the text was a blurry photo of a large, bearded man leaning against a van that looked like it had survived multiple demolition derbies. It screamed competence, or possibly desperation. Either way, he sounded like my guy. I called the number. "Yeah, Big Al speaking," a voice like gravel tumbling in a cement mixer answered. Hi, Al," I began, trying to sound casual. "My name's Marty. I have kind of an unusual project I was hoping you could help me with. I'm looking to install it's sort of a drive-through car washing system. In my driveway..." There was a long pause on the other end, filled only by what sounded suspiciously like someone chewing on rocks, followed by a deep grunt. "Car wash, huh? Like, for your own car? In the driveway?" "Exactly," I said, relieved he hadn't hung up. "Nothing too fancy. Just some sprinklers, maybe some brushes, a frame to hold it all up. Make it easy to rinse the car off, you know?" "Huh," Al repeated. He seemed to be processing this novel concept. "Driveway car wash, right. Need plumbing hookups, yeah? Maybe some kind of frame? Drainage gotta go somewhere, unless you want to flood the joint." Yes? Probably all of that?" My technical knowledge was, admittedly, limited. Right, Al mumbled. "PVC pipes, sprinkler heads, maybe some kind of spinning brush thingy. Yeah, sure, piece of cake." My heart soared. "Done weirder," he added nonchalantly. "Built a potato cannon turret for some guy's deer stand last fall. Shot spuds clean over the tree line. Driveway car wash? No problem. I'll swing by tomorrow. Take a look-see." Big Al arrived the next day in the colossal rust bucket van from the ad, which appeared to be powered by sheer willpower and possibly fermented cabbage. He himself looked like he could arm wrestle a grizzly bear and maybe win. He surveyed my driveway, kicked the tires of my Fusion with a grunt of what I hoped was approval, spat thoughtfully onto the lawn, narrowly missing Chloe's prize azaleas, and sketched a plan on the back of a greasy fast food napkin. It involved even more arrows and question marks than my own design, plus something ominously labeled Soap Blaster? "All right," he declared, clapping his enormous grease-stained hands together, making me jump. "Let's make some magic happen." The following days descended into glorious, unmitigated chaos. Big Al, occasionally assisted by a silent, equally large, and possibly related individual named Gus, transformed my tidy suburban driveway into something resembling a Mad Max film set. They dug shallow, meandering trenches across the concrete. "For drainage!" Al bellowed over the roar of a rented jackhammer, though the trenches seemed to lead nowhere in particular. They erected a surprisingly sturdy, if aesthetically challenged, frame over the driveway using a hodgepodge of pressure-treated lumber, galvanized pipes, and what looked suspiciously like sections of an old swing set Al had sourced from somewhere. The plumbing was a true testament to Big Al's improvisational genius. Multiple garden hoses were wrangled, clamped, and duct-taped into submission, feeding a bewildering network of PVC pipes, elbows, T-junctions, and sprinkler heads of varying sizes and spray patterns. For the spinny brush thingy, Al produced 2 enormous, bristly brushes that looked suspiciously like they belonged on a municipal street sweeper. "Found 'em," he winked, offering no further explanation. He mounted these onto the frame using salvaged washing machine motors and a wiring setup involving alarming amounts of exposed copper and black electrical tape. Neighbors emerged from their houses like meerkats sensing danger, staring with wide, bewildered eyes. Children pointed and whispered. The constant noise of sawing, hammering, drilling, and Big Al bellowing instructions like, "Nah, Gus, hit it with the bigger wrench," echoed through our normally tranquil street, replacing the gentle chirp of birds with the soundtrack of questionable construction. And then inevitably, like a moth drawn to a flickering, code-violating flame, came Mrs. Peterson. She marched down the sidewalk, Fifi the poodle yapping hysterically at her ankles like a furry alarm system. Her face, normally pinched with disapproval, was now pale with incandescent fury. "Martin!" she shrieked, her voice barely audible over the whine of Gus wrestling with an angle grinder. "What in the name of all that is holy and zoned R1 residential is this monstrosity? Are you building a cage? A gallows? A public torture device?" Big Al paused his hammering, spat again, this time hitting the azaleas, prompting a sharp intake of breath from Chloe watching at the window, and wiped grease on his already filthy overalls. "Nah, lady," he called out cheerfully, oblivious to the waves of rage emanating from her. "It's one of them automatic car washers. Pretty slick, huh? Gonna have this baby spick and span every day?" I stepped forward, wiping sawdust off my cheek, adopting my most reasonable, helpful expression. "Just making things more convenient, Mrs. P," I chirped, gesturing at the chaotic structure. "Ensuring full compliance with HOA regulations regarding vehicle cleanliness. Now I can wash the car every single day. Problem solved." Mrs. Peterson looked from me to Big Al to the dripping PVC pipes to the menacing street sweeper brushes. Her brain seemed to visibly short-circuit. She opened and closed her mouth several times, making a small, strangled sound like a boiling kettle. Then, without another word, she spun around and power-walked back to her house, Fifi trailing behind her, phone already clamped to her ear like a vital organ. The storm clouds were gathering. "All right, moment of truth," Big Al declared a day later, wiping his hands on a rag that had achieved a state of permanent grime. He gestured proudly towards the finished product. "Your drive-through deluxe is ready for launch." It was something. The wooden and metal frame straddled the driveway like a drunken skeletal robot attempting yoga. PVC pipes snaked everywhere, connected by copious amounts of plumber's tape and hope, dripping rhythmically onto the concrete below. The street sweeper brushes hung expectantly, their bristles stiff and slightly menacing. It was, objectively, the ugliest, most ramshackle structure in a 5-state radius. I adored it with the fierce pride of a mad scientist unveiling his creation. "Okay," I muttered, sliding into my Fusion, which was currently sporting a light layer of construction dust over yesterday's grime. "Here goes nothing." Chloe watched from the front porch, her arms crossed, her expression caught somewhere between abject horror and morbid curiosity. Doug, naturally, had materialized at the end of the driveway, camera phone held high, ready to document the inevitable disaster. I put the car in drive and crept forward at the speed of a nervous snail. "Hit it, Al!" I yelled out the window. Al grabbed a large red lever that looked like it had been salvaged from a 19th century factory and yanked it downwards. With a shudder and a groan, the system roared to life. Water erupted from a dozen different sprinkler heads, spraying with wild abandon. Some hit the car, some hit the lawn, some hit Big Al square in the face. A significant amount arched gracefully over the fence, providing Mrs. Peterson's prize roses with an unscheduled high-pressure shower. I eased the car under the brushes. One spun with the lethargic reluctance of a Monday morning commute. The other spun with the alarming speed and high-pitched screech of a banshee riding a power tool. I winced as it scoured the passenger side door, hoping Big Al hadn't accidentally sourced brushes made of steel wool. At the far end, Al flipped another switch. A repurposed industrial fan, which he proudly called the Airblade 5000 dryer, roared to life with the sound of a jet engine preparing for takeoff. It mostly just succeeded in blowing the water droplets into new and interesting patterns on the windshield and plastering my hair to the side of my head through the open window. I emerged out the other side, dripping and slightly deafened. I put the car in park and got out to inspect the results. The car was wet. Very wet. It was also streaky, with patches of dirt merely rearranged rather than removed, and I was fairly certain the screeching brush had left a faint swirl mark on the door panel. But technically, incontrovertibly, it had been washed. "Success!" I declared, perhaps a bit too loudly, trying to ignore the growing puddle at the end of my driveway. Big Al beamed, oblivious to the water dripping off his beard. "Told ya, piece of cake!" My daily car wash ritual commenced. Every morning before work, or every evening upon returning home, I would solemnly pilot my car through the sputtering, screeching, dripping, vaguely paint-stripping contraption. My car achieved a new state of being, perpetually damp, faintly streaky, and occasionally decorated with stray brush bristles. But clean? According to the letter of the law, as I chose to interpret it, absolutely. The neighborhood fallout was immediate and predictable. A small river constantly trickled down the street from my driveway. Soap suds. Al had rigged up a dubious detergent dispenser using an old bleach bottle and what looked like aquarium tubing, frequently formed fluffy white drifts on neighboring lawns, particularly Mrs. Peterson's. The high-pitched screech of the possessed brush became a familiar, unwelcome sound, punctuating the otherwise tranquil suburban soundscape. Mrs. Peterson, predictably, went into overdrive. Her calls to the HOA became legendary. She escalated to city code enforcement, reporting illegal structures, improper drainage, hazardous plumbing, water waste, and probably violations of the Geneva Convention regarding aesthetic warfare. She called the Environmental Protection Agency about the potential impact of generic dish soap runoff on the local snail population, which, okay, might have been a slightly valid point, though I doubted my car wash was causing an ecological crisis. And inevitably, she called the police. Repeatedly. Officer Miller, bless his weary soul, became a reluctant regular at my address. He'd pull up, lights off, sigh heavily enough to deflate a small blimp, and amble over to wherever I was, usually trying to unclog a sprinkler head or reattach a loose brush. "Mr. Miller," he began on his third visit that week, his voice heavy with the accumulated weariness of 1,000 pointless suburban disputes. "I need you to explain to me, slowly, again, what this thing is." He gestured vaguely at the dripping structure. "It's my personal vehicle rinsing system, officer," I explained brightly, hoping my enthusiasm was contagious. It wasn't. "Ensuring my car meets the stringent cleanliness standards set forth by the Pleasant Valley Estates Homeowners Association. Very efficient. Mostly." Miller stared at the screeching brush, which chose that moment to emit a particularly violent shriek. He looked at the rivulet of slightly soapy water meandering down my driveway towards the storm drain. "Right," he said slowly. "A rinsing system. Sir, are you, by any chance, operating a commercial car wash here? Charging neighbors? Offering detailing services?" "Heavens no, officer," I declared. perhaps a little too quickly. Strictly personal use, for my vehicle only. Though Doug had offered me $5 to let him drive his muddy pickup through it, an offer I was sorely tempted to accept. Because, Miller continued, consulting his perpetually growing notes, we have ongoing reports of excessive water runoff. We have potential code violations regarding unpermitted structures, possibly illegal plumbing modifications, noise complaints about the, high-speed brushing mechanism, and now concerns from the EPA regarding soap discharge into the storm drains. He sighed again, a sound that seemed to echo the collective exhaustion of law enforcement officers everywhere dealing with neighborhood squabbles. I'm going to have to file another report. Code enforcement will likely be in touch. Vigorously. Again. The official notices started piling up like snowdrifts alongside the now comical HOA fines. Cease and desist orders from the city. Potential citations for water waste and illegal discharge. Demands for professional engineering plans and permits for the structure Big Al had built using a napkin sketch and hope. My driveway car wash, my glorious dripping monument to malicious compliance, was under siege from all sides. The suds of rebellion were about to hit the fan. The whole ridiculous saga culminated, as these things inevitably seem to do in a formal hearing. This wasn't just some cozy chat in the HOA clubhouse basement. Oh no. Thanks to Mrs. Peterson's relentless campaign and my structure's flagrant disregard for pretty much every municipal code imaginable, this was a full-blown City Zoning Board of Appeals hearing. The official charge, read out in a monotone drone by the board secretary, was something along the lines of petition to compel removal of an unpermitted, non-conforming, nuisance structure and abatement of associated code violations at Hum's, my address. Catchy. The hearing room was sterile, official, and packed. On one side sat Mrs. Peterson, looking triumphant, armed with a binder thick enough to stop a bullet, flanked by a few grim-faced neighbors I recognized as her staunchest allies in the war on visible dirt. On my side sat Chloe, looking pale and clutching my hand tightly, whispering prayers for this nightmare to end. Doug was in the back row, giving me encouraging thumbs-ups and occasionally snickering. Big Al had surprisingly shown up, wearing a relatively clean plaid shirt and looking vaguely confused, like he'd wandered in looking for the DMV. And leaning against the back wall, radiating an aura of profound world-weariness, was Officer Miller, presumably present as an official witness, or possibly just morbid curiosity. Mrs. Peterson presented the case for the prosecution first. It was a masterwork of righteous indignation and carefully curated evidence. She laid out the entire sordid timeline of my car's chronic soilness, complete with time-stamped photos. She displayed dramatic pictures of the monstrosity in my driveway, the dripping tangle of pipes, the menacing industrial brushes, the rickety, unsafe frame. She played audio recordings captured from her bedroom window, featuring the high-pitched screech of the rogue brush and Big Al yelling, "Hold her steady, Gus!" She presented alarming close-ups of soap bubbles allegedly suffocating her prize roses. She spoke with trembling passion about the destruction of neighborhood character, the plummeting property values, hers specifically, the criminal waste of precious water resources, the potential environmental catastrophe lurking in my storm drain, and the sheer, unmitigated, unprecedented audacity of my actions. She even tearfully suggested I was probably mere moments away from opening a commercial car wash, complete with flashing neon signs and underpaid teenagers waving towels, turning Pleasant Valley Estates into a low-rent highway strip mall. It was quite the performance. She barely stopped short of claiming my car wash personally insulted the Founding Fathers. Then, it was my turn. I smoothed my tie, took a deep breath, and approached the podium, clutching a few notes scribbled on the back of a car wash violation notice. "Members of the board," I began, trying to project an air of calm reasonableness I definitely didn't feel. "Thank you for hearing this unusual case." I paused for effect. Let's be absolutely clear about one thing. This entire situation, the structure in my driveway, the water, the admittedly excessive amount of PVC pipe, exists for one reason and one reason only. Because I was repeatedly harassed, fined, and cited by my neighbor and the HOA for the heinous crime of having a car that occasionally looked like it had been driven. I recounted the initial complaints, the absurdity of the lifeless car argument, the official notices demanding sustained compliance with impossible standards of cleanliness. "They demanded," I declared, my voice rising slightly, "that my car be perpetually spotless while parked in my own driveway, an impossible task for anyone who actually uses their vehicle. So, I provided a solution." I gestured towards Mrs. Peterson's photographic evidence. "An innovative, albeit perhaps slightly unconventional on-site system designed specifically to ensure my vehicle meets their exacting standards at all times." "Is it perfect?" I conceded, glancing back at Big Al, who offered a non-committal shrug. "Maybe not. Does it use some water?" "Yes, as does any method of washing a car, including, I might add, the frequent lawn sprinkling required to maintain the vibrant green mandated by the HOA. A few chuckles rippled through the audience. "But," I concluded, looking directly at the board members, "it directly addresses, with extreme prejudice, the specific complaint leveled against me. They wanted a clean car? I gave them the cleanest car on the block, multiple times a day if necessary. I argued vehemently it wasn't a business, just an extremely elaborate tool for personal property maintenance. Doug, bless his chaotic heart, even stood up during the public comment period to add, 'Yeah, and it totally works. I saw Marty's car yesterday, cleanest it's ever been.' He conveniently omitted the fact that it was also covered in streaks and missing a small piece of trim near the wheel well, thanks to the overzealous brush. The board members looked utterly bewildered. They flipped through thick binders of city ordinances, clearly finding no specific statute explicitly forbidding the construction and personal use of a ramshackle automatic car wash in one's own driveway, although approximately 17 other codes related to plumbing, drainage, unpermitted structures, setbacks, electrical wiring, and general public nuisances seemed highly applicable. They questioned Big Al about his construction methods and permit acquisition process, receiving vague, rambling answers involving good used parts and mostly eyeballing it. They questioned me about water runoff mitigation. "I'm actively researching a complex rainwater reclamation system involving barrels and sophisticated filters." I lied with impressive conviction. After much deliberation, whispered consultations with city attorneys, and several moments where I thought the chairman might just bang his gavel and flee the room, they reached their verdict. My glorious, dripping, screeching drive-through deluxe, alas, could not remain in its current magnificent form. It was, as Officer Miller had repeatedly noted, in violation of numerous building, plumbing, and zoning codes. The unpermitted structure had to come down. The questionable plumbing had to be capped. The improper drainage had to be rectified. The possessed street sweeper brushes had to be silenced forever. However, in what I could only interpret as a small nod to the sheer, mind-boggling absurdity of the entire situation, and perhaps a silent rebuke to Mrs. Peterson's fanatical campaign, they conceded one crucial point. I did have the right to wash my car in my own driveway. They couldn't fine me into oblivion for failing to maintain a showroom shine 24/7. They strongly suggested a less intrusive, properly permitted car washing station. perhaps involving installing a legal drain connection to the sewer line and using a standard pressure washer like a normal person. So the monstrosity was dismantled. Big Al and Gus hauled away the frame and the brushes, Al muttering something about using the parts to build a killer haunted house decontamination shower. I paid a licensed and horrified plumber a small fortune to install a proper drain in the driveway, correctly sloped and connected to the sewer system. Now, when my car gets dirty, which, shocker, it still does, because it remains a car operating in the known universe, I wheel out my trusty pressure washer to the officially sanctioned, properly drained spot. It's less dramatic. It's certainly quieter. It's significantly less likely to trigger a multi-agency municipal investigation. But every time I'm out there, methodically spraying off the accumulated grime, I inevitably glance over towards Mrs. Peterson's house. Sometimes I see her watching from her pristine living room window, her arms crossed, her expression still radiating disapproval, though perhaps now tinged with a hint of grudging defeat. I always make sure to give the car an extra thorough rinse, maybe letting the spray linger a little too long near the property line, sending a fine mist towards her eternally perfect roses, entirely accidentally, of course. Then I turn, give her a big, friendly, sudsy wave, and get back to washing my car. My way. The car wash may be gone, but the principle? That stays sparkling clean. For now, anyway.